Hello, my name is Natalie Osborne, and I am here today to present on psychological safety, building a culture to prevent or to benefit productivity and to prevent a lot of problems within the workplace. And I'm presenting on behalf of Ellis Advantage and some research that I did with Sheila Walsh. So, first of all, what's included in this workshop, we're going to define psychological safety and talk about some of its benefits, and then also talk about why psychological safety is important specifically in today's workplace. And then we'll get some practical strategies for creating a psychologically safe workplace. And then finally, we'll just do a recap of what we learned. So, to start, we're going to talk about what psychological safety is. Psychological safety is a state in which individuals feel comfortable showing and employing themselves, their true selves, without fear of negative consequences to their self image, status, or career. So, that means that these individuals have the belief that their workplace is safe for interpersonal risk taking. So, those are risks that they're taking as an individual, which can include raising problems maybe with their supervisor, with other coworkers, disagreeing, feeling comfortable bringing up their opinions, asking questions, and admitting mistakes. So basically, it's just having the feeling of safety that they can be themselves in the workplace and give opinions without the fear of losing their job, repercussions, consequences, all of those things. So, there are lots of different benefits of psychological safety, but some include knowledge sharing between coworkers, with supervisors, creative problem solving capacity. So, feeling like you can work well with others to solve problems, team learning, because we learn best when people make mistakes and we talk about it instead of just focusing on the bad. And then also just having many different perspectives is really positive for learning. Team effectiveness, because obviously with learning, also your team is going to be more effective if you have more people contributing and feeling safe to contribute. And then finally, organizational performance. So the reason why this webinar is talking about a culture for better productivity is because we're not only talking about building a positive culture so that individuals feel safe, but it's also going to benefit the entire organization. So that's why it's important in workplace specifically. So, a little bit more on why this is important in this context. The current work environment is very dynamic and hyper competitive, and employees are consistently being asked and expected to have a more active role. And employers are asking for more results without considering the productivity needs of their employees. So, what we need to do is identify factors that are going to foster willingness by employees to take those interpersonal risks and invest their energies into work. So, learning, organizational change, employee engagement, all these positive things within the workplace are highly facilitated by that cognitive state of psychological safety. So, it's important to think about psychological safety from an individual standpoint, which we'll talk a little bit about that in a minute, but it's also important to understand that the entire organization is impacted by the psychological safety of the employees. So now just to go a little bit more into the individual versus the team aspect, most of the early research on psychological safety concludes that this is a shared belief by members of a team, which is valuable to look at the entire team as a whole. However, that leads to asking, does the team exhibit high or low levels of psychological safety? Is the team doing well in this area? However, individuals can also have divergent views of psychological safety within their team, and there's many reasons why that would be the case, but maybe they have had different workplace interactions or experiences with their team leader that makes them not feel comfortable in certain situations. Maybe they have some kind of issue with coworkers where they feel like they can't bring their ideas to the table without criticism and having a lack of support there. So that could mean that that individual will have a different level of psychological safety within that team just based on those different interactions. Also, early on, when someone hasn't been in the workplace for that long, they may not have interacted enough to cultivate a shared experience and perspective as their coworkers. So we cannot assume that the entire group feels the same. So it's important to find a balance between focusing on the individuals and understanding that everyone's experience is different, and then also seeing how that can affect the entire team. So now we're going to go through some strategies that will help build a psychologically safe work environment. So number one, we have to lead with empathy, not ego. So we need to be genuine with employees because that will foster a supportive environment where employees feel comfortable confiding in their leaders. If they feel like their supervisor or leader is being fake with them or not, supportive, they're not going to confide in them. They're just going to, come from more of a follower perspective instead of having that collaboration. So it's also important to consider the group's lived experiences instead of just assuming that your experience is the same. That's where the empathy piece comes. You can't have too big of an ego and think that your experiences are everyone's experience and that you know how other people feel. You have to just assume that everyone is different and try to work with them to figure out what those differences are and how you can be supportive. And then also, it's important to not use your position of power to bully employees into producing work, because if they fear failure because they think there will be repercussions or consequences, they're not going to feel as comfortable with asking for help, offering opinions. They're just going to stick to what they think they're supposed to do, and that's going to hinder their creativity and overall what they're able to produce. And then avoiding passive aggressive manipulative behaviors, that kind of goes hand in hand with that bullying. It's just important to have an environment that is safe in the way that people feel that you're compassionate to their differences and supporting them in whatever they need, not what you think they need. The second strategy is to build a team culture, not a group of talented individuals. It's important to create an environment where employees are not avoiding sharing with coworkers or supervisors out of fear that that information will be used against them. It's much more valuable to have employees that are comfortable working together, because that's where a lot of creativity and innovation comes from, and just feeling more comfortable in the workplace in general. So that's good both for productivity and for the individual well-being of all of the employees. So it's important to encourage a collaborative environment where people are depending on each other to solve problems. And then also in the hiring process, it's important to hire individuals based on their ability to work with others on a team. So obviously, you have to think about the talent and the competency of the people that you're hiring, but you also want to put a really high emphasis on hiring people that will be working well in a team. You want to find a balance between the two. Talent is obviously very important, but it's not the most important. And if you are hiring talent only individuals, that's going to kill the team culture. You want people that can work well together, because even those who are not as talented, if they work with others well, they're going to grow a lot more than the people that are only focused on their own individual talents. They're going to plateau and hit a peak, where those who are working well in a team will not only be better for themselves, but they're also going to help contribute to that positive work environment. And then the final strategy is helping employees meet basic needs. There's a very basic model, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, kind of helps us see the individual motivation and what people need to move on to the next stage of motivation. So if we look at the bottom of the pyramid, if people are not meeting their physiological needs, they're not going to be able to, go to the next stage in that pyramid. So it's important, even as an employer, to make sure that employees have their physiological and safety needs met simply by just checking in and making sure that people are getting the support they need. Because If they don't have those, they're not going to be able to connect well with both the employer and coworkers. They're not going to have the self-esteem, and they're not going to be motivated to reach higher levels of productivity in the organization because those needs are not met. So caring about an employee as an entire person, helping them meet those basic needs, and then seeing where they can grow from there, that will lead to opportunity for growth, significance, and certainty in the workplace. So, just to give a quick recap, the three strategies that we talked about to building a psychologically safe environment is to lead with empathy, not ego, focusing on seeing people's differences, acknowledging those differences, and not taking our power and using it in a negative way in the workplace. And then strategy two, building a team culture, not a group of talented individuals, both in the hiring process and when encouraging people to collaborate and just making sure that there's a nice balance of the two. And then the third strategy is to help employees meet basic needs, just checking in to make sure that those basic needs are met so that employees can progress and work towards more things and be motivated to do work more efficiently. All right, are there any questions?
I have a question. So, like, based on presentation, you had mentioned like ego being an issue. What other challenges could come with this like issue of psychological safety? Could it be like intimidation or just like a lack of connection to your employer?
Yeah, absolutely. I think intimidation is a big one, especially if you're in a position of power and your employees are intimidated by giving their input, then they're not going to feel as comfortable to speak up, which is one of the worst things you could possibly do in, a collaborative environment is hinder someone from, giving them their opinion. I think there's also probably a lot of people just don't really think about the impact. So I would say that to foster a psychologically safe environment, it's an active thing. You can't just assume that it's going to be psychologically safe if you don't use factors like intimidation and bullying. It's important to like actively make that an intention of the workplace. So if you're naive or unaware, then that could also be a problem. So you have to make sure that you're making that a priority.
Hi, I was just wondering, would you say positivity in the team relies mainly on psychological safety, or are there other factors involved?
Yeah, I would say that that's probably a really big factor because if people feel that they're safe in the workplace, they're probably going to feel like they can better support others as well, which I think that's a really important thing with the hierarchy of needs. If someone's needs are met and they feel safe, they're going to be more positive and more uplifting to others. So ultimately, it's going to cultivate a more efficient and a more positive and encouraging workplace because people feel like they can depend on one another and they feel supported.